Hello students. I have introduced certain lectures on international relations theory, and in that series today I am going to discuss with you the emergence of international relations as a separate discipline. Now, as you all know that international relations is a very popular subject. So first of all, in this particular topic I'll discuss about defining international relations, and then how it emerges as a separate discipline, and then some of the important milestones, some of the turns in international relations as a subject that came over the period of time. So one of the foremost challenge was to define international relations, or like to develop some of the basic understanding about the subject international relations. So when we talk about international relations, we can say that it is the study of relationships and interactions between countries, activities and policies of national government, international organizations, non-governmental organizations, and multinational corporations. We can also see it in that context that the way in the family, in the society, we interact with the different other people. Similarly, at the international level, state, they also interact with other state, and they not only interact with the state, but they also interact with the various other organizations, international organizations, as I said, various other governments, and over the period of time, non-governmental organization also emerged as one of the important players in international relations. So states, they also interact with them. In order to understand that, there is a very comprehensive definition, you can say, given by Quincy Wright, and he said that it is not only the nations which international relations seeks to regulate. Varied type of groups, nations, states, governments, people, regions, alliances, confederations, international organizations, even industrial organizations, cultural organizations, and religious organizations must be dealt in the study of IR if the treatment is to be realistic. So when we go by this definition, we can easily understand that how the scope of international relations is wide, how wide it is. So it is not only interaction among state, it is not only focusing on that, rather it is also focusing on governments, it is also focusing on people, it is also focusing on civil society organizations, various regions, alliances, confederations, international organizations, and as the time progresses, cultural organizations and religious organizations, they also became part of states' wider interaction with the international community. If we talk about IR, it can also be understood, like when we focus on international relation as a subject, so it can be understood as a theoretical subject. Simultaneously, it can also be taken as a subject which is quite practical in nature, or a policy subject, right, that can guide different state or state behavior. Apart from that, its academic approaches too can be either empirical or normative or both. It means that in international relations, the study can be based on empirical methods or normative methods, or it can be both. So both the methods can also be used simultaneously. Another important thing about international relations as a subject is that often it is considered as a branch of political science, but it is not limited to political science only. In fact, international relations as a subject is studied across various disciplines. Scholars belonging to different streams like history, economics, philosophy, law, etc., they have studied international relations, and they have studied it extensively. Although in that study process, it also became very important for them that which perspective they are carrying. For example, if I talk about a historian who studied international relation, the historical perspective about it became dominating, and it can be reflected in his studies, in his research. Similarly, if I talk about an economist, the perspective of his team, it also will play an important role. If I talk about a philosopher, then probably he will focus on the political philosophy side, of international relations. And if I talk about law, then the legal perspective or international law that can be studied. Another important thing is that when we go through all these various approaches regarding the study of international relations, one thing came into our mind that international relations, it is an interdisciplinary inquiry. It means that it is not limited within the scope or parameters of any particular discipline as such. It is an interdisciplinary discipline that can be studied by experts belonging to various streams. In international relations, one of the most important questions that have always haunted human beings throughout history were the questions of war and peace. Now, these questions of war and peace and diplomacy, they have been discussed since the time of ancient Greek historian Thucydides, but international relation only became a proper academic discipline in the early 20th century. So we can say here that international relation, it has a very long history. So from the time of Greek historian Thucydides till the time of 20th century, international relation was studied, but it was not studied in a systematic manner. So it failed to develop as an academic discipline, a distinct, separate academic discipline that can be studied scientifically. Before the emergence of nation states, which exist today, the pre-national forms of government or constitutions which ruled the different parts of the world were personal states, theocracies, oligarchy, city-states, territorial empires, and trading empires. So these were the forms that were existing before the emergence of nation state. As you all know, that in modern times, if we see, then international relations, it include the study of state systems, political systems, concepts, theories, ideologies, doctrines, diplomacy, statecraft, various institutions, various organizations, various processes, various norms, various values, various laws, and it also deals with the question of war and peace. Peace of Westphalia, or the Treaty of Westphalia as popularly it is known, of 1648, it was a major stepping stone in the development of the modern state system and the international relations. So many scholars, they are of the opinion that international relations emerge, or systematically the study of IR, it started with the Peace of Westphalia when nation states emerged. It was the treaty, the Peace of Westphalia, it was a treaty which ended the 30 Years' War, which was one of the most destructive war in the history of Europe. The war, or the series of connected wars that began in 1618, it began because the Holy Roman Emperor Ferdinand II, he tried to impose Roman Catholicism on the Protestants in Bohemia. It set Protestants against Catholics. The war came to involve the major powers of Europe. So it was a long war. It continued for almost 30 years. And many countries, they have jumped in that war because of their disagreement regarding the nature of rule, regarding the nature of, say, theocratic rule, like, or what kind of intervention or what level of domination should be of church over the state systems. Before international relation emerged as a distinct discipline, it has always been studied by historians, by international lawyers, by political philosophers, and they have written extensively about international relations for many, many centuries. But as I said, that they have always carried their own perspective about international relations. Another important thing is that it has always been studied as a sub-discipline. So it was never studied as a separate discipline, as a different discipline, as a distinct discipline, as a discipline that needs to be studied separately in a more scientific and organized manner. Now, one question that came into our mind is that how international relations it emerged as a separate discipline. So after World War I, with the establishment of Chair of International Relations at the University of Wales, it is believed by many scholars that this was the beginning when international relation was studied as a separate discipline. Later on, it was followed by the establishment of the Department of International Relations in early 1920s in the university in the London School of Economics. So, if I have to say, then who were some of the early occupant of that chair that was established at the University of Wales, then the names that comes to my mind is of Alfred Zimmermann, C.K. Webster, and E.H. Carr. So these were some of the early initiatives that were taken by various academic institutions to study international relations as a separate and distinct discipline. Later on, other chairs also followed in Britain and United States of America. Before 1919, international relation and its subject matter was largely shared by law, philosophy, economics, politics, and diplomatic history. As an academic discipline, international relations initially focused on the study of political and diplomatic relations only. Now, it is noteworthy here that initially the study of international relations was primarily focusing on political and diplomatic relations only. The reason was that the dominant perspective at that time was political in nature, or the primary question that they want to understand, that they want to comprehend, is the question of war and peace, which is again relating to the political actions taken by the state. But later on, it has also incorporated commercial relations among various states, or you can say economic relations. Gradually, as the discipline progressed, it has also incorporated people to people contact, it has also incorporated cultural interactions among the states, and multiple other institutions emerged. For example, from 1970s onwards, a number of regional organizations were established in different parts of the world. They also became part of the larger study of international relations. But if we focus and if we say that what was the most important question that international relation was always trying to decode, or the scholars that always want to address, was the question of war and peace. Now, different streams of international relations or different ideological schools, thought, or thinkers, they have always tried to understand, explain, and find out the solution of the question of war and peace. Now, here broadly the world was divided, and there were different perspectives. Some opinions were given by idealist scholars, then some opinions were given by liberal scholars. Then there is a realist school of thought which is quite popular and quite dominant in the field of international relations. Gradually, many other schools of thought also emerged, like the English school, Marxism, feminism, constructivism, environmentalism, and so on. So all these schools of thought, they have tried to understand the various dynamics of international politics. But still, the most dominating aspect of international relation is the question of war and peace. Now, realist scholars, they have tried to understand this thing in the context of human nature. In a way, if I talk about Morgenthau and other realist scholars, then they were of the opinion that if you have to understand the behavior of the state, or why a particular state act or indulge in a particular kind of action, then the first thing that you need to understand is human nature. Because they believe that state in a way is a larger body of human beings. So the traits that dominate human behavior, they also dominate the behavior of the state. So we can understand it in that sense that as a human being, we have different ambitions, we have different goals, we have different objectives. According to our capability, according to our income position, we generally expand, right? Similarly, if I talk about the state, every state act in a particular manner. They also have ambitions to grow, to expand. Another important thing is that every state also carry a national interest. Now that national interest is also not very static in nature. It is quite changing with time. So according to the position of the state, according to the leadership of the state, according to time, according to the economic status of a country, its national interests were defined and redefined time and again. So one state that is at one point of time, you can say, is weak, then probably later on, when they acquire power, when their economy strengthen, when they gain military power, they may once again redefine their national interest. Similarly, international organization, international structure, or the leadership of the state, they also determine the behavior of the state. So when we have to understand the question of war and peace, according to realist scholars, these are the most important factors that determines the behavior of state. If I talk about the counter of it, because they have been countered by idealist scholars and by liberal scholars, they have argued that a more peaceful world order could be created by making foreign policy elites accountable to public opinion and by democratizing international relations. So according to them, there is a possibility of peace. Peace can be established. Cooperation can be enhanced among the states. It can be done. What it requires is that in case of democratic countries, you need to make all those people accountable to the larger public opinion who are indulged in the foreign policy making process. When you will make them accountable, they won't be able to take arbitrary decisions, because ultimately it is the members of the society, it is the people at large, those who suffer because of the insane decisions of state leadership sometimes. Another important thing is that international organizations, they can also play an important role. And if you democratize international relations, it means that broadly, when the concern of the states, they are based on some rationality and they also take care of humanity, then probably this question of war and peace can be addressed and peace can be established. When we talk about international relations as a theoretical discipline, then many texts were written. For example, there was a book that was written by E.H. Carr. The title of that book is 20 Years Crisis. It was first published in 1939. This 20 years crisis is basically the time period between 1919 and 1939. This was the time period between two world wars. So this 20 years crisis, try to focus on this particular thing, that first of all, why wars has taken place. So why in 1914, why the First World War started at the first place? Another important question is that, is there any possibility to prevent the war? They have also focused on that what steps can be taken by the state to prevent a similar kind of outbreak in future. So what kind of steps can be taken? So for example, after World War I, League of Nations was established. Now League of Nations was established with the mandate of the states. But League of Nations failed to act in a decisive manner, and it failed to prevent the outbreak of the Second World War. So what exactly were the reasons? Now here some of the most important reasons that came to our mind is that the countries that have propagated the idea of League of Nations or an international organization that can prevent a war, they themselves fail to go according to that. They even fail to join the organization. In fact, the idea of establishing an international organization was based on that premises that states themselves are not capable of taking rational decisions. They need external intervention. They need external guidance. They need some international norms. They need the pressure of international community. They need collective security of some kind or collective security arrangement of some kind, because only with the help of international organizations such kind of wars can be prevented. Then if we focus on those 20 years between World War I and World War II, that phase was also quite turbulent in nature. For example, after World War I gets over, through the Treaty of Versailles, the international community, or you can say the victors of World War I, they have imposed certain unreasonable conditions on Germany. Germany was blamed for World War I. Now we should always keep this thing in mind that whenever a war takes place, the onus or the responsibility should be shared by all those who participated in it. Another thing is that even if you want to take certain punishing measures, they should be based on some rationality. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. And that was the reason that in Germany there was a lot of instability, there was a lot of unemployment, people were not happy, the German people felt humiliated. It has created a new kind of crisis in German society. And more or less, all the countries that have participated in World War I, whosoever was not adequately addressed, right? Whosoever didn't get what they were expecting. Here I am talking about the countries that were on the winning side. Even they were also not very happy. So they have their own complaints, they have their own grudges, they have their own ambitions. And they were also not happy, very happy with the outcome of the war. So, and how the politics of Europe, it has grown, what changes came in different countries of Europe. It became a very, very important thing. And in the 20 years that E.H. Carr has tried to cover through his book, these 20 years can give us good insights about the efforts of international community, the efforts made by various states, and the outcome of it, whether they remain successful or not. Unfortunately, they failed, and Second World War started. There is another important book, Politics Among Nations, which was written by Hans Morgenthau. It was first published in 1948. This book is said to be one of the most important texts in the field of international relations. So Hans J. Morgenthau, he has given 6 principles of political realism. They have been debated, they have been analyzed, they have been criticized, but they were quite relevant. We cannot understand the realist school of thought, or we cannot understand the nature of international politics truly without Morgenthau's 6 principles of political realism. So here Morgenthau gave importance to the behavior of state and how state act in certain conditions, and what defines the national interest for a state. And he has also mentioned this particular thing, that the roots of the behavior of the state, they actually lie in human nature. So these were some of the very important things that Morgenthau has mentioned and highlighted. Now, why these 2 particular texts are so important? Both these texts, they have tried to develop a broad framework of analysis so that we could understand international reality. We could analyze the behavior of state. Another important thing is that both these studies, they have also provided theoretical tools for understanding general patterns of behavior of various states. Now, these general patterns, they indicate that how states are likely to act in certain situations. Here, the conditioning of state or the environment of state also played an important role. Apart from that, these two texts also reflected on the most appropriate form of political action in the realm of struggle for political power. So, acquiring power or acquiring political power is something which is natural. It means that every state in the field of international relations try to acquire political power. But what are the rightful means of acquiring power? That is very important. And apart from that, the last point could be that international relation is beyond the realm of international law, international organization, morality, or ethics.